coach, and she was a co-facilitator. Oops.
So dear shirt.
She was a co-facilitator in our boot camp for many, many years. And so now she's here and she's going to be talking about positive intelligence and some great topics about how to stay really positive. So Tenny, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a happy Friday morning. Wonderful to see so many familiar faces. There are a number of faces of people I don't know, which I'd love to meet at some point in time. But I'm very excited to be here to talk about this exploding body of work called positive intelligence. Let me see if I can get my screen to my slides to come up. Can you all see those? Okay, good. All right, so let me get my screen organized here. All right, so I want to start in a place that might be familiar to some of you who were in a boot camp that I facilitated for about the last 10 plus years of facilitating boot camp. I shared some information on positivity with you that came out of the positive psychology arena. And I want to kind of start there, kind of get us on familiar terms. And then for those of you who haven't heard it, it may be new news for you, but it applies to the topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is positive intelligence. Often referred to also as, let me go back, often referred to as creating mental fitness. And it's the notion is from striving to thriving for improved performance, strong relationships, and well-being. And feel free to raise your hand. I have the screen up, so I don't know, I can't see your hand, but maybe one of my platinum buddies can help me with any questions that you may have along the way. So let's start where some of you may already be, and that is that I shared some information from positive psychology and positivity because I felt it was really important for you from two perspectives. One was to increase your success in job search. And when I go through the material, for those of you who don't know, it'll make more sense. And also the importance of positivity and leadership. Most of you are leaders. And this new research that's come out just in the last 20 years or so is making it pretty clear that that leadership needs to evolve to create environments that are more positive. We all talked about gremlins and whispers from the beginning in boot camp, so we'll just briefly touch on that. So without further ado, let's see, there we go. So the positive psychology arena started back around the turn of the century, around 2000, and it's credited by starting by a guy named Marty Seligman, who was a professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. He was just coming off of being president of the American Psychological Association. And he had this epiphany that psychology had evolved into solely focusing on the illnesses of psychology, only the negative, the maladies of psychology, aggression, depression, bipolar, etc. And when he looked back to the original purpose of studying psychology, it wasn't just to study the maladies, it was to study both sides. So he decided to start the first course of study at the University of Pennsylvania in positive psychology. And it has taken the world of psychology by storm. I want to talk specifically about the work by Barbara Fredrickson, who was a graduate student getting her PhD at Stanford when she had to decide what was she going to focus her work on. She was a physiological psychologist, which studies the relationship between our bodies and our minds. And she decided that what she wanted to make her life's work was the study of what happens to us when we're in a state of positive emotions. Oh dear. She went on to do some graduate work at Berkeley and became a professor of psychology at the University of Michigan, where she wrote the Broaden and Build theory of positive emotions. It won the Templeton Award for the first paper in positive psychology. And essentially what her research had shown, oh, and then subsequently she published a book on positivity I think it was published in 2009, which was a continuation of her initial work in the broaden and build theory paper. But essentially what she found was that when we're in a state of positive emotions, we are able to see more broadly, we are more open to new ideas and new thinking. We can actually tap into our own resources, our own, and the way she talks about it is you are able to be the best version of yourself when you're in a positive state. Her paper, The Broaden and Build Theory, had a lot of orientation around resiliency, that we are most resilient. So think about this as we're talking about this. As I said, I think it has implications for job search. I also think it has implications for leadership. So try to think about both of those things as we're going through here. But it's pretty important in job search to be resilient, to bounce back from the disappointments that happen and the challenges that are normal in job search. It's also pretty important for teams, organizations, to be able to bounce back from sort of normal barriers that happen, normal challenges that are part of the daily life. She was able to prove that people are more creative when they're in a state of positive emotions. So pretty important for innovation. She was able to prove that we are more connected to other people when we're in a state of positive emotions. Well, that's pretty important in job search for your networking and your interviewing. And in the workplace, it's about collaboration and teamwork. She believed that you could actually use positive emotions as an undo button for negative emotions. So if you find yourself in a negative place, and that's going to make some sense when we get into the positive intelligence work. And the notion of this positivity ratio was that they believed that for people to be flourishing, which is a term in psychology for well-being, that they needed to have a positivity ratio of 3 times as many positives as negatives. You'll see this work in the positive intelligence. So it's kind of the opposite of being in a state of fear. When we're in a state of fear, we don't see broadly, literally, physiologically or emotionally, we don't see broadly, because all we need to do is run. All of our bodily resources are being sent to our large muscle systems so that we can run fast. Everything that isn't about survival has been suppressed. So literally your digestive system, your reproductive system, your immune system are all suppressed when you're in a fight or flight emotion place, which might explain why so many people get sick from long periods of stress, because their immune systems have been offline. Again, you're not resilient in a, you just need to run or fight, essentially, or hide. You don't need to connect with other people, because survival is only about you. It's only about you surviving. And the positivity ratio obviously doesn't make any sense with this. So all of this, by the way, this isn't logical. All of this is governed by hormonal response to the world around us. You secrete different hormones when you're in a fight or flight emotion state than you secrete when you're in a positivity state, when you're in a state of positive emotions. These are not, obviously, so these are not choices that you make. These are the way you respond to the world around you. I heard a neuroscientist at a conference say that we are 5 times more wired to pick up the negative than we are to pick up the positive. And that's the reason for that is essentially is that we are the descendants of cavemen who survived. They got away from saber-toothed tigers and marauding tribes that were trying to take their lands and their horses, etc. And so they passed that down to us, but we don't need that for those reasons anymore. But we are saddled with this extremely strong survival response. So keep that in mind as we go. You might be curious as to how did I get into this? My background is human resources, right? That's why I spent 30 years in corporate HR. along about the year 2000, which is about the same time as positive psychology started, I was a VP of HR at Experian. We had been acquired by a British holding company that was imposing a lot of change requirements on us. And we weren't doing very well. And what is it? McKinsey says 70% of change efforts fail. So we tried every change management methodology we could get our hands on at that time, and none of them worked very well until we bumped into a methodology called appreciative inquiry. And it was getting a lot of positive play in the field of psychology. And so a bunch of us went off to Taos, New Mexico for 4.5 days to get trained in appreciative inquiry. Well, I'm a biology major. I like things that are grounded in fact and theory and, real stuff. And when I sat in the training in the beginning and they started talking about one of the 5 principles of appreciative inquiry is the positive principle. Well, I'm sure that my eyes literally rolled into the back of my head because nobody was talking about positivity at that point in time. Nobody was, other than a few circles in the academic world of psychology. But thank goodness we went through a simulated experience as a part of the training. And that's where I saw, oh yeah, this is different than anything that we've tried before. But I wasn't really sure working in a financial services company whether I could get anybody to do this. But we had been working, one of the other people that went to training and I had been working with an internal client who had been placed over a group of people. The leader that had been there for 30 years was moved out. And he was charged with bringing about some pretty significant change. And as you can imagine, to say it wasn't going well would be an understatement. So we sat at his desk and told him about this process. And I said, it might help you, but it's really different than anything else you've seen. And he leans across the desk and he said, well, shit, Tenny, nothing else I'm doing is working. Let's try it. So it's like, oh, okay. So long story short, we took this group of people that was angry, completely in fear mode. They were so locked in fear that they weren't even talking to each other, much less with leadership. And in a 4-day session over a period of 1 month, we took this group of people. And at the end of that time, they were a passionate, excited, aligned, unified group of people focused on achieving the changes. And at the end of it, I sat back and said, wow, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen a group of any sort at this level, much less a group that came from where they were. And so it made me realize something was going on there. And I didn't know what it was at the time. And we kept having success after success that was similar. And I became more and more and more curious about what was going on here. I was fortunate enough to go to an appreciative inquiry conference in 2004 where Barbara Fredrickson was a speaker. And she intrigued me. And when I left Experian and started my own business, I became voraciously interested in figuring out everything I could wrap my hands around this notion of positives and strengths. Gallup had come out with engagement, and their work on strengths actually came out in 2001, right after I got trained. So all of a sudden, there was an avalanche of data, research that was coming out from all different varieties of areas: neuroscience, neuroleadership, positive psychology, and more. And the cool thing was that it was all consistent. It was all consistent and all complementary. All right, so we'll leave here, but you'll see this later in the work that we talk about. So I'm pretty sure that most of you did work around gremlins and whispers with Rick Carlson's group book, Taming Your Gremlin. We used to say that we have on one shoulder, we have a gremlin who is a megaphone and is screaming things in your ear that you wouldn't say to your worst enemy. And on the other shoulder is your whisperer who tends not to say anything unless you call upon it. So it's kind of an interesting concept here. And we'll talk about this because the work on positive intelligence kind of took this to a whole different level. And the reason we did it in boot camp was to help you to deal with those disempowering statements that your gremlins were screaming in your ear, because you don't need those in a time of change and a time of challenge. You need to be able to quiet those voices because they're disempowering you. They're getting in your way. So hopefully that gets us all onto the same page here. So we'll move on. So Shahrazad Shamin is the guy that started this work on positive intelligence. He is one of those people that has a degree in all things known to man. He has a degree in neuroscience, psychology, engineering, business, and you can see that the variety of resources of science that he built this on. And so, you know, I was a little bit skeptical because I learned about this about 3 years ago, maybe a little more than 3 years now. I bumped into it from my coaching circles. Shahrazad used to run Coach Training Institute. So his belief was the way to get this work out into the world is through coaches. And so he's been training coaches all over the world in the field of positive intelligence. But it's really interesting because it's pretty much the same research that I've read, other than he's got much deeper knowledge in neuroscience than I do. But what I looked at all this research and I said, I think that we have the information that we need to create higher performing organizations. He looked at this research and said, I think I can create an operating system that will help people shift out of the negative side of their brain and operate more in the positive side of their brain. Oh, well, that's completely different. So that's what this is about. So this is I have taken my research and I've all the research that I've collected and read, my own personal experience, and I've condensed it into this book that is just about ready to be released. It'll be available, I think, about mid-month for advanced sales and available for print and e-version on around May 1st. And so this is about positive change, positive leadership, and positive organizational culture. So you can see the connection here. So let's dive in now deep into positive intelligence. So he thinks of positive intelligence and mental fitness. You're growing the mental fitness and the positive side of your brain. If you want to think about the negative responses, living in fear, which is where the negative, well, let's hold off on that. I'll come back to that. Anyway, this is about your capacity to respond to life's challenges with a positive rather than negative mindset. So not those things that your gremlin was screaming in your ear. And the impact of that is peak performance, peace of mind, probably affecting your as much as your wellness, because it's not so good to have cortisol running around in your system all the time for the reasons we sort of already talked about. And to have healthy relationships. Those are the key primary areas that they focus on. So his research, as I said, he's a lecturer at Stanford, so he's done a lot of work with Stanford students, CEOs. He's been very involved with YPO. And so that's where, and then he published his book on positive intelligence, I think back in 2012. So the notion here is rather than gremlins and whisperers, he calls them saboteurs and sage. And there are 10 saboteurs that live in your survival brain, which he calls the saboteur brain. And there are 5 powers of the sage that you can tap into to reach your highest performance in your sage brain. So here are some little pictures of the 10 saboteurs and the 5 sage powers. Everyone has a chief saboteur, and that is the judge. The judge judges you. It judges other people, and it judges situations. That's the thing that's constantly scanning in your brain for things that are bad that could hurt you. And then there are 9 accomplice saboteurs, and they're controller, hyperachiever, restless, stickler, pleaser, hypervigilant, avoider, victim, and hyper-rational. So these are the kind of archetypes of the other voices that are in your survival brain. And he believes that these accomplice saboteurs are established in your childhood. And they're based upon the overuse of your strengths. And if any of you have done any work with Gallup strengths, strength finders, or now Clifton strengths, an overuse of a strength is a weakness. But this is these come out of the overuse of your strengths in your childhood as strategies for you to grow to adulthood. So So you can go on the website. It's a very friendly website. It's positiveintelligence.com. And if you're curious about learning more about this, I would encourage you to do that. And you will come across a saboteur test. And you can take the saboteur test for free to find out what your chief accomplice saboteurs are. So James here, his top accomplice saboteur is controller, next avoider, next hypervigilant. And it's kind of interesting to see that and to understand what are those voices in your head, where are they typically coming from, and what are they typically kind of saying to you. So here's a description of a stickler. And you can see sticklers are perfectionists. And I had a lot of coaching clients that were sticklers. And one of their primary challenges is their hesitancy to try new things because they're afraid of not being good enough they're not going to be successful enough at them. So they don't try, they hold off. And so the use of this work is really helpful in helping them to overcome that. So the saboteurs live in your brainstem, where you might think of it as your lizard brain. You've heard of the amygdala. It's part of the limbic system. Some people talk about the left and the right side of your brain, which is not really accurate, but it's what we have commonly referred to as the left side of your brain. Whereas the sage lives in your prefrontal cortex, which is your logical brain. It's based on empathy circuitry and comes out of the right side of your brain. So saboteurs motivate you through negative emotions: fear, stress, anger, guilt, shame, insecurity, etc. It may spur you forward, but it spurs you forward in a less optimized place. You are not in your most, look back at the information that we shared from Barbara Fredrickson and what you're able to do in fear and what you're able to do when you're in a positive state. You're not operating at your best when you're operating out of your saboteur brain. Sage motivates you through positive emotions, where our greatest powers reside. So again, saboteurs might generate success, kind of, but certainly not happiness. And the sage generates your highest level of success and happiness. And for me, I mean, I thought about that as I first started learning about this in the work when I first started getting engaged with positive intelligence. If I could just improve the overall quality of my life by 5 or 10%, that in and of itself is enough of a reward, right? If I can live in positivity a little more, that's great. So all of this comes out of the research that they did, and they found 3 core muscles, if you want. We talk about mental fitness here. 3 core muscles: the saboteur interceptor, the sage, and the self-command muscle. So how do you grow these core muscles so you can better thrive? Well, one of the ways he wants you to do this is, we know that meditation grows the gray matter in the positive side of your brain. And let's go back and talk about because we spend so much time in fight or flight mode, the neurocircuitry, the neural pathways in the negative side of our brain are very established and very deep and broad. Because I think of it that's our sort of almost our default setting. Whereas the neural pathways in the positive side of our brain are not so frequently traveled. And so they're not as strong as the ones on the negative side of your brain. And all of this is about how do we grow more neural pathways in the positive side of our brain, and how do we deepen them, and how do we make them so that they can compete with the neural pathways on the positive side of your brain, on the negative side of your brain. Ideally, they become stronger so that you spend more time in your sage brain, and ultimately your survival brain, the neural pathways will atrophy. That's the overall big time goal. So you might be asking yourself, and I question this, what he says in the work is all negative emotions are bad for you. Well, I went, what? You mean I can't be disappointed? I'm not allowed to be. And the notion is that, is pain good for you? You can put your hand on the hot stove, right? Negative emotions are only helpful for 1 second as an alert. You want to take your hand off the hot stove. You don't want to stay on the hot stove. You don't want to stay in negative emotions. Being in negative emotions diminishes your ability to respond. So the notion is you want to know, you can use it as a signal. That's your interceptor muscle. That's your knowledge of, and what the sage lives in the sage lives in the part of your brain that has positive emotions, Barbara Fredrickson's work, peace and calm, clear-headed focus, creativity, and the ability to see the big picture. I hope you can see her work all through there. His work is very, very highly based upon her work. I can see it all through the program. It operates from the sage perspective. Well, what is the sage perspective? The sage perspective is that when something bad happens to you, you can look at this and say, every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift or an opportunity. Every negative thing that happens. And I remember back in the corporate world, somebody saying once upon a time that inside of every problem is an opportunity. And again, that was a time when I rolled my eyes into the back of my head. But it's true. I think it is true. So how does he describe it? So he uses this story. It's called the stallion story. And it's about a farmer in Southeast Asia who lives outside of a village, and he has this beautiful stallion. The village is going to have a horse contest, so people can bring their horses, and they'll judge their horses and come out with the top horse. Well, as you might imagine, his beautiful stallion won the award. Well, the thieves in the neighborhood in the village said, oh, well, this stallion is now really valuable after winning this big award. And so they steal the stallion. And so the people in the village come to the farmer and they say, oh, this is so bad, so sad that you've lost your prize stallion, la, 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 la. And his response to them was, nothing is neither bad nor good. And they look at him, what? They go, nothing is either bad nor good. They go, okay. And so as it works out, the stallion is a very spirited stallion, and he breaks away from his captors. Well, not only is he a spirited stallion, but he's a handsome stallion. And he has befriended all these wild mares who on his quest home follow him. So when he arrives back at the farm, he comes back with a bunch of wild mares. So the people in the village are, oh, this is so great. You got your horse back. Isn't this wonderful? Look, you got all these beautiful mares, blah, 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 blah. And his response was, once again, nothing is either good nor bad. And they're beginning to think he's crazy, right? So it works out that his son decides he's going to try to break one of these wild mares. And he gets thrown from the mare, and he falls and he breaks a leg. And again, the villagers, oh, it's so sad that your son broke his leg, la, 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 la. Well, it works out that the army is anticipating that there's going to be war. And so they decide that they're going to go through and conscript all the able-bodied males in around the village. And because his son is a broken leg, he doesn't get conscripted. So he doesn't go off to war and get killed. So that's the stallion story that helps you to understand everything that's bad that happens to you can sometimes be turned into a gift or an opportunity. Okay. So the question is, which is true? That the saboteur, that things are bad, or the sage, that this could be a gift? And the truth of the matter is, it's whatever you believe. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think it's bad, then it'll probably be bad. If you think there's an opportunity, you might discover one. So back again to the saboteur, these are the 3 muscles again that you want to grow in positive intelligence. So how do you grow them? And we talked about meditation grows the gray matter. But meditation is not very easy to do, and a lot of people have struggled with it. But what he's come up with are these little PQ reps that you do 2-minute, 3-minute little meditations that you do periodically throughout the day to keep your sage muscle charged. So you want to do one? So hopefully the answer to that is yes. So just if you choose to participate here, and you only need to have a minimum of 10 seconds to actually get credit to have an impact as a PQ rep.
上次差不多啊，我得有啥答？
Hello. Is everybody muted? So let's do a PQ rep here. If you choose, get comfortable, take a couple of deep breaths. If you're willing, close your eyes. Be patient here. And gently rub 2 fingertips together with such a tension that you can actually feel the fingertip ridges on each of the fingers. Take your time. Now gently rub all the fingertips of one hand against the fingertips of the other hand and across the palm, and simply notice all the sensations of touch that you're feeling. That's the PQ rep. Now that's a tactile PQ rep. They're all different kinds. There are visual ones, there's auditory ones, there are different kinds of tactile ones. There are breathing ones, which are pretty normal in regular meditation. So there's a broad array. And the notion is that you can use this as a way to intercept when you've been hijacked by a saboteur. When you find yourself in a negative mode, you have a negative thought, you can use a PQ rep to sever that and help you to shift into sage. Now, if you're in a meeting and you find yourself slipping into saboteur mode, you don't want to do the one with the closing your eyes, but there are quite a few that you can do with your eyes open that nobody will know that you're doing them. There's one that he has you to see how many of your toes you can find, and wiggle them if you need to find them. Well, you could do that in a meeting and nobody would know you're doing that. And that helps you to get out of the negative mode that you're in and help you to shift into the positive mode where you're better able to deal with whatever it is that's going on there. All right. So this is the simplicity of the operating system. If you're feeling negative motions, stop. You're in saboteur mode. Do some PQ reps to quiet the saboteur and to move into sage. Use the sage perspective every time something negative happens and see what you can do to convert it into a gift or an opportunity. Now, I can look back, and I think if most of you can think back to times in your life that bad things happened, they felt really bad, but as a result of them, better things happened as a result. And I think most of us, and that's really what this is, that sometimes things that look bad aren't bad, they're actually good. And you can help to generate finding this gift by using the sage powers of empathy, curiosity, creativity, clear, calm-headed action. And there's a strong focus on personal values as well. All right. So the question is it really possible just to shift from saboteur to sage response, even in a tough situation? Yes, but the speed and intensity depends upon how strong your mental muscles are. So it depends upon how much you get into this work and how much you make it a part of your daily life. This isn't a situation where you learn about it and you flip a switch and it's over. This is something about doing this every day in your life for the rest of your life. All right, so this whole program starts with a 6-week program that teaches you all this, the details of all of this. This 6-week program includes, and this was originally designed, as I mentioned before, he's a coach, and it was originally designed for the significant executives that he coached, and he had to make it simple and he had to make it accessible. So it starts with a 1-hour video that usually, all of this, by the way, is delivered on an app that you put on your phone when you get enrolled in the program. And on a Saturday, typically on a Saturday, the 1 hour, each Saturday for the first 7 Saturdays, which is 6 weeks, you get an hour video that's broken up into pieces. So the notion is that you're supposed to watch it by the end of the weekend for the most part. You're also supposed to be doing 12 minutes of PQ reps every day to build the gray matter on the positive side of your brain. You will get audible 8 chapters of his positive intelligence book in an audible format on the app, and you can also get a PDF version. And for the first 6 weeks, you will attend pod me. Well, what's a pod? He wants people to go through this in groups, because there's research, and we all have had that experience where we learn from others when we go through some new learning. We're more accountable, and we can support one another and help each other learn from each other's experiences. So that's what the 6-week program is all about. If you went to the Positive Intelligence website to sign up, it would cost you $1,000 for this first 6-week program. But because he wants coaches to do this work, he has given us the opportunity to provide it to our clients as a foundation and attach coaching to it. So I can provide that for you if you're interested at a little bit of a reduced rate, plus some coaching attached, which is less than the $1,000. And I have a 4-month program and I have a 6-month program, both of which are under $1,000. After the first 6 weeks, you can choose the opportunity to go into a GROW program. It's called GROW. If you were to buy this online from Positive Intelligence, it would cost you another $37 a month. That's included in my 4- and 6-month programs. And if you want to, you can buy it from me at a slightly reduced rate after those programs are over. I have clients that went through my very first pod who are still buying GROW 2 years later, because they find it so important to be able to have access to this. On your app, you also have a PQ gym that has all different kinds of PQ reps of different lengths, 2-minute, 5-minute, 15-minute. And what I've tried to do is to build those PQ reps into my regular life, to make it just part of my life. Like when I'm at the Costco gas station and I have to wait in line, I'll do a PQ rep. If I'm at a long light, red light, I'll do a 1-minute PQ rep. You can find ways. I do that when I take a shower in the morning. I do it when I brush my teeth. I've tried to build it into the way I live my life every day. And there are ways they teach you, he teaches you, and I can support that as well as a coach. So that's it. I'm going to stop sharing and give you the guys the opportunity to ask some questions.
So I think we have a hand raised. Udo, do you have a question? Just go ahead and unmute yourself and
jump in.
chat. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Here's the question. I've heard at random times through my career of a case study that was done on World War II prisoners of war. And they basically studied what prisoners were successful in escaping and what were not.
Oh, interesting.
And they put the prisoners in 3 buckets in terms of what I perceive as their mindset. They had the negatives. Of course, that's you know what you get there, right? Then they had, pardon?
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there was a very, very uber positive ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were the ones that were in the middle. They were positive, yet they were also, to paraphrase it, maybe realistic and like, man, we're really going to have to figure out how to go through the challenge. And it actually turned out that the most positive folks were not successful, given the way the case study described it.
Interesting.
So what I wanted to ask you was, in the context of what this reported study is, do you think it's true? Because you hear case stories all the time. And if you do, how does that wrap into the different philosophies that you've been describing? Are the prisoners that succeeded in escaping exhibiting what you expect, or they got by and escaped despite not exhibiting the behaviors you expect? How would you assess?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with the study, so I don't know enough to know, exactly what they were measuring, and how they were measuring it. It's possible they were using fight or flight to flee. It's possible they needed those, those fight or flight physiological responses to do that. Maybe the positive ones had said, well, I'm going to make the best of this, so I'm just going to stay here. and eventually they'll come and get me. I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. The notion too is that this can be applied in a broad set of ways in your life. You can apply it, we already talked about job search, but you can apply it to leadership. You can apply it to parenting. You can apply it to dealing with stress. You can apply to dealing, when you're in the grow set mode of the program, Shahrazad does a 1 hour live with Shahrazad every month. And that only grow members get to play in. And it's on a variety of topics: leadership, parenting, sleep, stress. He's got a whole set of them that he shares with you to figure out how can you best take advantage of this positive intelligence notion. So again, Udo, I'm not familiar with the work. I don't know exactly what they were. I can surmise, but I don't really know, and I'd be sort of speaking out of school. So how about you, Russ? You got a question?
Can I please have Udo tell us who were the survivors?
The survivors were the middle case. What I call, the positive Pollyannas were not most successful. The most successful was the in between of having positivity, yet realizing, may have to cut off our arm in order to get out of jail. I mean, I'm being silly to make dramatics here, but
Thank you.
I'm wondering now, like, thinking about you mentioned the thing about the tigers, the fighting very well. We could talk a little bit about the tigers or the wolf war diplomats in China, etc. But anyway, but like I'm thinking with the rising wealth inequality going globally, domestically, globally, are we moving back in that direction?
I don't know what, I'm not sure that I understand your question.
Well, are we gradually moving back to a direction of being like closer and closer to survival mode, as was once before, because due to wealth inequality and
no, I don't think it's so much that. It's really about the way your brain works and interprets the world around you on a daily basis. Is your brain, every minute of your survival brain is scanning the world for possible threat. That's its job. Yeah. And if it perceives anything that it thinks might be a threat, it will trigger fight or flight response.
Yep.
It's really about that, and it's really about, generally speaking, being in fight or flight is not very helpful in today's world.
Yeah.
Being able to use your best resources to deal with whatever the issue is a better place.
Mm-hmm.
That's the notion.
Yeah, I think the perfectionism described me too much, and I found that it used to be when it was in certain situations where I was around others that thought this way. It's like who we're around is going to influence too.
Yeah. We all have them. So that's that's a notion. Oh, and one of the things I love that he promotes is that we're all human. None of us are perfect. We shouldn't be trying to be perfect. We shouldn't expect anybody else to be perfect. We're human, and that's one of our greatest attributes, is being human. So, that we all have saboteurs. We all have different combinations of saboteurs. And what this does is helps you to be one of the biggest sage powers is empathy. Empathy towards yourself when you're not being perfect. So for you, Russ, that, when you're less than perfect, and empathy towards others that are struggling with their saboteurs. We're all in a struggle with our saboteurs every day. All right, Bill, how about you?
Yeah, two questions. When you're working with a team, does it help to know the saboteurs of the other people on the team? And then the second question is, have you worked with companies with appreciative inquiry? Have you also worked with companies using positive intelligence, and what kind of results did you see?
I have not yet worked with companies. There is a whole orientation towards teaming in PQ, but I haven't gone there yet. I had to be certified first to be able to do that. I'm now certified, so I'm anxious to do that because I think this has huge implications in teams. Helping each other understand, our shortcomings, helping people understand, it's the notion of strengths turned on its, upside down. The strengths work is so important because if we can understand each other's strengths, we can leverage each other's strengths. And this is if we can understand those things that tend to get in each other's way, we can support each other in our battles with our saboteurs. So I'm anxious to do one, but I have not done one yet. But I think it has huge potential. It's another way of having a dialogue around the things that are getting in the way.
Exactly.
And that's normal. That's life.
Yeah, thank you.
Alan.
Hey, Tenny, great topic today, great discussion. Love the summit, so thank you. My question for you is, this is a group of senior leaders and we're often put in charge of departments and teams and meetings and things like that. What I'm looking for is maybe one practical way that we can transition from, if we're in a meeting and it's a particularly tough discussion, there's a lot of negativity. How do you turn that around in a department meeting or somewhere where you're the leader of the meeting and you see just a lot of negative occurring? Is there any one practical way that you can give us to help turn that meeting back into a more positive discussion?
Well, I would probably lean back on my appreciative inquiry background, which is all about asking positive questions. And one of the things that after I read Barbara Fredrickson's work, I understood why we were getting the results that we were getting in appreciative inquiry. Because all we do in appreciative inquiry is elicit positive orientation. We shift people's body chemistry into positivity. And the group is able to tap into each other. They're able to collaborate. And so I would probably go back on my skill set and ask a positively oriented question that might shift the dialogue. And all of that, by the way, is explained in my book, in the use of positive change, appreciative inquiry in day-to-day life. If we can it's really what we did in boot camp, if you think about it. In boot camp, we never look to criticize. We never look to find the bad things. What we did in boot camp was to help you to find your best self, to learn to see other people's best selves, to identify how to talk about your best self, and then ultimately to be able to describe who you are holistically when you're in your best place. And I think that that's why boot camp, that so many people find boot camp helpful, even transformational, is because it helps you to shift into that positive place where you're able to tap into all of that. And very quickly, I used to feel when we did them in person before COVID, that we used to do it at Christy's office. She had a small conference room, and we'd pack 14 people in there plus 2 facilitators. And I would watch people coming in on the first day, and I would look at their faces. I could see it. I could almost read their minds. They were starting to look around the room for saber-toothed tigers. Who is it sitting around this table that could diminish me, could make me feel less than, could make me look bad? And within an hour's time of being in boot camp, that's gone. Because we've changed the body chemistry. We've changed the people begin to feel safe. This whole notion of psychological safety is another new body of work that evolved from understanding that the amount of fear that we're experiencing in today's organizations are impeding progress. And so there's a lot of work being done around how do you create psychological safety to minimize people being in survival, in the negative space, feeling threatened. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I would probably try to shift the dialogue, and there's a skill that comes along with doing that, learning how to do that, to help them take the conversation to a different place.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Wendy. Unmute. Oh, there
Hi
you go.
there. Hi, good to see you,
Good to see
Tenny.
you.
I have spoken of you to my organization. I'm working for this a city organization now, and I've talked about positive inquiry. I've talked about appreciative inquiry, and we're in a place of change management.
Mhm.
And Bill asked the question, everybody's almost asked the question, have you applied or do you see the way to apply this technology or this methodology to a change management functionality somehow where we could work with our organization? We've all taken strength finders. This is a really amazing thing to me that this organization felt that was important.
Yeah, it is
So
good.
here's an audience of
Fine, that's
people.
a good sign.
That's a good start, right?
I would, yes, absolutely. I have done appreciative inquiry work with schools, with organizations, with companies, it is the only way I would ever work on change. Because it's the
Yes.
only way I have ever found to be effective.
Through
It's not only is it effective, but it's game changing.
Right.
People will achieve levels of change that they never dreamt were possible. The only time it won't work, and I've had one failure in my almost 25 years of using appreciative inquiry, and it was when we didn't understand the leader. She was brand new to Experian, and she said all the right things, but at the end of the day, she was so controlling that her people knew it didn't matter what they had to say. And so the whole purpose of appreciative inquiry is to get everyone's perspective shared and in the room. And from that, we call that surfacing the collective wisdom of the organization. And from that, the group comes together and decides what's most important. Every voice in the room is heard. Every voice in the room is honored. And it's pretty dramatic because most people in most organizations don't feel seen nor heard. And to be in a situation where they're in a room where they get to hear everyone's perspective is pretty compelling. So and this you can see that positive intelligence is built on the positivity work. So they're very related. And it's helpful, yes, it might be another tool to help you be even more positive. But if you're talking about change, I would apply appreciative inquiry.
Very good.
I did some really great work with two schools in LA to help them change their functioning. And it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable for both of them, for me too.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you. I'm pleased to hear that you're adding to your armamentarium,
It's been a compelling journey for me to read everything I could get my hands on that would add value to this concept. Okay,
thank you. We'll
Tracy.
talk.
All right, good. Please do reach out.
Hello, everyone. One of the things I wanted to mention with regard to, you talked about addressing somebody with something negative, and I think Alan brought that up. And Tenny, I think you're right on. Obviously, you've got a lot of expertise in this area. When I was at Ingram Micro, we had a department that was really had a lot of morale issues, but they were the highest performing department in the company and the most visible. And I was asked to turn that department around. I'd only been there a year. I just had received my MBA. I got promotion out of that. And then I was given this task. I had never done that before. So I got everybody in a room. And I think that one thing we need to do is set the standard and the rules right up front. So, I got everyone in a room, in a conference room. There were 30 people, and I just set those rules. And sometimes that doesn't work with somebody that's such a strong-willed negative kind of saboteur, but you can set rules to say things like, everyone's idea is a good idea. Let's write all these ideas. And many of us have done that and heard this before, but it really sort of shuts them down in the beginning in a lot of ways before you get into these other conversations. So I wanted to talk about that really quickly of my experience in doing that. It was very effective and in calming those storms, so to speak. The second thing other thing you mentioned is you mentioned about, the right brain, left brain. You're absolutely right. It's not a right brain, left brain, and the reason why I'm talking about this is I was involved for 12 years and in that time I just soaked up from a research perspective with a nonprofit, an arts nonprofit, very well known by the name of Chuck Jones Center for Creativity. For those of you who don't know, Chuck Jones, the famous animator from Warner Brothers. And I worked with his family for 12 years. And so toward the end of working with them, they the last few years, they asked me to, Linda Jones, who's the Chuck Jones' only child, came to me and said, Tracy, we are turning this into a 501(c)(3) from a private foundation, and to honor your work, we would like you to be on the board. So I was honored to be on their board and working with, there were 18 of us. All of the people on the board were major hitters in the animation industry.
Wow.
So here I have all of these creators, right? The creativity like abound everywhere. And I came from corporate America, was one of the most like, okay, we have to get structure here, that kind of thing. Because all my life, even though I had a creative bent to me, I was also suppressed in a lot of ways to be creative in this corporate environment. So now I've been told creativity, do your creativity, do you, Tracy, do you. And it was really enlightening. And one of the major things, though, that I learned from it, and there's a lot that I learned from it, was what the legacy of Chuck Jones was that we were all about. And that is to bring some type of creativity in every single aspect of your life. Because what happens is we're 98%, there's studies that show we're 98% creative human beings when we're born, but we are actually conditioned out of that creativity through not only our parents, when we go to school, when we go to work, all of these avenues in which we participate in forums, we're told, don't, in school, I was told when I iced, hot cross buns in high school, even. I mean, it goes back farther than that. But I remember this, and many of you can relate. The nun in our Catholic school came up to me and said, that's the wrong color of icing. That's the wrong color of green on your hot cross buns to make a Christmas tree and shape it as a Christmas tree. And I had a conversation with her very logically and calmly and said, everybody has a different concept of what is real to them and that they appreciate. And she ended up giving me an A, our team an A, because of my negotiation skills. But that is something that others perceive and put on you, that they think it's not right, when in fact, your creativity is very important. So
Interesting.
And that creates the positive influence and positive outward results as well.
You may be familiar with Marcus Buckingham, who was very influential in getting the work of strength finders out into the world from Gallup, who's out on his own. And one of the things that he says, which is really interesting, and think about this in parenting, and then we'll say something beyond that, is that negative reinforcement is actually an impairment to learning.
Yeah.
That is so contrary to our belief set. We're supposed to tell people how they can fix themselves, but what it does is it throws you into fight or flight.
Yep.
That threatening experience. And so when I say that, people say, oh, that's what my dog trainer told me when I was training my dog. Don't punish your dog from doing, it's kind of interesting. But it's really big in parenting. I think it's really big for school-age children. There are many right answers. There may be a best right answer, but there are many right answers. That's one of the things that we've believed in for years in appreciative inquiry. All right, Dan, we're a little over time, but let's take your question.
Well, Tenny, thank you so much. This was very beneficial to me. I'm able to look back at situations in my life. I had 2 week-long classes at HID Global called Culture of Performance. And it was put on by a psychologist, 2 psychologists, and they were trying to grow managers. But what they didn't talk about was saboteurs and sages.
Right.
And
This is pretty new work. I mean, for the most part, this is pretty new stuff.
right. And, you know, I got laid off from HID. That's a long story.
Yeah.
But my saboteurs in that first week after being laid off just damn near destroyed me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I managed to pull myself up by the bootstraps and get on a positive page. And then the best thing I did was I had a friend of mine recommend me to executive boot camp. And everything that you said about, you know, the first day, very true. It brought back great memories. I didn't feel like there was a tiger in the room. I was just like, you know, what is this all going to be about? Right? I was open-minded. So I think I was fairly positive.
Well, I think positive. The good news is about positivity is contagious. And people want positivity and they want more positivity. If you can just get people in that place where they're not in negative survival mode, where they can shift to that place, then it's all up. You know, Barbara Fredrickson talks about it as an upward spiral. Then positive emotions are an upward spiral. There's a downward spiral as well, by the way. All right, so I think we're at the conclusion here. I don't see any more raised hands. I hope that you found this to be meaningful and make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, reach out to me and I'll try to share more. But I think I believe that we have the capacity to change the way we're running organizations today. And that's really the reason I wrote the book. And I hope that you'll be interested in buying a book. Thank you for helping me to change the world. If you're not linked in with me, link in with me. I think I'm linked in with most of you. I think most of you are on my email list. So you may be getting information on the book. And if you're not, let me know and I'll get you on that as well if you're interested in hearing the things coming. We're going to talk a little bit this week or next week about teamwork, about some of the research that has come out about teamwork, because teamwork's pretty important in today's world. And it's one of the focuses of leadership in the leadership section of my book. All right.
Tenny, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you all for coming. I hope you found it valuable.
We love seeing you, and those of us that had you as our leader in boot camp, we can't thank you enough for the positivity you have always graciously given to each and every one of us. You are a living example of what you preach. You truly are.
But I do have saboteurs, and I need to deal with them every day.
Don't we all, right?
Yeah, you do. Uh-oh, Russ has one
Well,
last.
no, it just reminded me of the TQM, Total Quality Management, from the Ed Training and so many other things, Stephen Covey. This all kind of ties in. Yes. It's
really interesting. You put it all out there, which is really what I did to write the leadership section of the book. And I distilled it all. It all connects. It's all saying more or less the same thing with a maybe slightly different nuance here and there.
Yeah, I hope the tiger emoji didn't scare anybody.
Anyway, it was great. Thank you for coming. I hope you find this valuable. And if you're interested in the coaching, let me know. Or if you're interested in knowing more about appreciative inquiry, I'm happy to share more about that as well.
And we'll be sharing your slides, will we?
I can't share them. They're not mine.
Okay.
They don't belong, other than the few that I added, they're not my property.
All right, that's fine, but we will share, in case any of you do not have Tenny's contact information, we'll certainly share that. And we look forward to your book coming out.
Thank you.
That's so exciting. Yes.
Right. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Take
Thank
care.
you.